Assalamu alaikum. Well, we've all been a little bit disconcerted, to say the least, these past few days, weeks. Not just a year and a half. No, this is getting to a dangerous point. So what I do is I try to put things in their proper place, because my proper place, I know, is reading Quran and reading this Tawheed book, Qawlun Mufid fi Kitab Tawheed. And the reason for that is when I'm dealing with an overwhelming issue, like the issue now of Palestine, and today is February 5th, when we've been exposed to some disastrous realities regarding the nature of rulers, their rulings, and what they base it upon. So this elicits in me even more so to try to understand what Allah is telling us. And I come from a perspective of someone that spent 10 years in grad school studying history, thinking that that was going to be the solution. I'll just find out what happened in the past, and that will help me actualize my place in the world. And you know the old saying, those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it. So I really thought there was a lot of value in studying history, but who knows who wrote it and how true it is. So the more you read Quran and Hadeeth and you study things like this book, Qawlun Mufid, for me is right after the Quran, because it gives you all the Hadith and the fiqh and the sirah. It's already here. So it's 1,000 pages, yes, but it's pleasurable. And I separated it into two halves because it was too fat, too cumbersome to work with. So when I was in Egypt, I had it made into 2 volumes. So interestingly, these hadith too that I'm going to give you, I love them so much, and they are at the end of the first volume. So I'm trying to imagine how it was organized, this book, because you can't figure it out. It's not organized on any real pattern that you could expect, the first chapter, surah of the Quran, etc., to the end. And it's not even organized on any set patterns of aqidah. It's a mixture that you have to really take a deep breath when you first see it, and you then, of course, assume you can never handle this. It's just too overwhelmingly rich. And Sheikh Uthaymeen, Allah yarhamu, he made the sharh in which he would try to make it a little bit malleable for us to handle with our very weak background, shall we say. I mean, other than the Sahaba and Tabi'in, the deen has unfortunately slowly been regressing in accessibility. And so when you say you want to go back and follow what the Salaf did, it's going to be way back, and it's going to be far removed from what we are experiencing in our human condition. And that's why I'm focusing on Palestine, because our human condition right now is dismal. So I would prefer to ask Allah, what can we do in this human condition? How should we go forward knowing how dismal we are and realizing that we are in perhaps the final days? Because we know the alamat as-sa'ah. They've been on the net now for at least 20 years, and we know what's happening. And we know the signs, and we know how close we are. That's an intro. I want to begin to discuss the concept of what is a nation state, what is sovereignty? Why are we dealing with this over and over again? And we've been well aware of at least 100 years or more of Zionism and the history of how the Palestinians were there, settled there, raised families there, and were kicked out of there less than 100 years ago and forced to leave their homes. And now they're doing it again. So is this in our DNA? Is this pompous feeling that you have a right more than anyone else, your holy land? Is this somehow in your bloodline? What is a Zionist? What does it really mean that you're going to rape and pillage and bomb and steal? That's what it means. And the British, supposedly bearers of civilization, helped them in this and still are. So, what are the genetics? Is there any such thing that we can determine anything by genetics? All this DNA testing, and I get so doubtful, skeptical of all of this. So what causes a nation state to emerge and then flourish and then decline? Nation state, what does it really mean? I mean, really, it was actually really, for our intents and purposes, after the Napoleonic Wars, when the boundaries of European settlements were put in place. And this is literally just 200 years ago. So all of this bloodshed we've experienced in the past year is based on what? How legitimate is this? All right, let's just say that nation state is formed of 4 components in order for it to be a viable nation state: sovereignty, land, population, and government. These things are fluid, but what isn't fluid are the words and the wisdom that you get when you study Quran and Hadeeth of the Prophet Muhammad. So now I want to begin. I'm going to break this into 2 parts. I don't want these to be lengthy. So let's take this Hadeeth, deal with half of it in the first lesson, and then finish it because the second half is more difficult. So here is the Hadeeth that I'm choosing in relation to this subject, yes, of Palestine and Zionism. An Abi Malik Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: 4 في أمتي من أمر الجاهلية لا يتركونهن. So the translation, Prophet Muhammad said, there are 4 things in my ummah that are of the affairs of ignorance. They will not be left. You will not leave them. لا يتركونهن. In other words, they're going to stick with you, my ummah. What are they? فخر بالأحساب وطعن في الأنساب. So these are the 2 of the 4, which we'll do now. فخر بالأحساب. Fakhara means to be vainglorious, so proud, strutting about of who? Your ancestors, your bloodline, your people. You think they're the best. And the obverse of that is ta'an fil ansab. You do the opposite with others. Ta'an, it's like you scorn, you deride. It's a very strong word. It literally has the meaning of stabbing you in the back. Really just hateful to these people that you feel are beneath you. So let's just step back and say, Prophet Muhammad determined that these things are going to stay and stick, and you're never going to leave them. And he said in Ummati, Muslims. But you know, I find it in non-Muslims as well. So as we delve into this hateful characteristic, it's a terrible characteristic in general. I can tell you that in my Irish, mainly Irish, 80%, and the other is Italian, my ancestors did this. And my mom did this. And I grew up hearing this kind of thing, primarily from my mother, because she was much less educated than my father. And my father was actually very religious, Catholic. He was even in the seminary for a year, but he was asked to leave because he was disobedient. They said, you will take some time off, consider your vocation. And then perhaps, if we deem it, they're trying to be very official, but actually the head priest said, if it weren't for your dear mother Rose, who, 13 children, big Catholic Vatican types, we'd never let you back. But you see, the ancestry thing, the bloodline thing, that's the story I heard from my dad. So when Prophet Muhammad says, you're never going to leave them, I'm going to try to put this in a frame of reference that would be very potent, undeniable, and very current, what we're living in. Who has more right to this land? Well, could it be the Jews that say we got there first? We are the original biblical inhabitants, and they feel superior because, why? Because they came over from Europe and they were highly educated in comparison with the Palestinians. Would that mean that they had more right? This is what I mean. Fakhr bi ahsab. In this book, they're even giving you examples, and it's funny because it was written by an Arab, and the sharh of Sheikh Uthaymeen, Allah yarhamu, it's coming out of modern day Saudi Arabia, and they're saying you're claiming that you are the descendants of Hussein and the Hashemites. So what if you're the descendants of the Hashemites? What claim do you have of obedience to Allah and good deeds? Good question. I don't think anyone's going to ask that over there, because there was the establishment of King Hussein, the first, you can say, semblance of politics in Mecca. And then when the House of Saud became competitive and they had their base on the other side of the country in Najd, they couldn't claim that claim to fame of bloodline. So they used Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who was a very saintly man. He was an alim, and he lived there. And he wrote the basic Kitab Tawhid, which was probably only a couple of hundred at most pages. Now it's 1,000 with the sharh. Should that mean anything right now? Well, it obviously kind of does, because Hashemite in Jordan, Hashemite, descendants of, well, I don't want to give them any credence. I'm American. And I find the American way, in this sense, much more Islamic. We don't have kings. We don't have dynasties. We don't believe in passing on power to the sons. Although they're saying they're already grooming Trump's son because he's so likable. I can't say anything because Prophet Muhammad said it's from the affairs of Jahiliyyah. And that means, am I going to be forever ignorant? Even though I know that Prophet Muhammad said this hadith in the framework of warning you to not do this. Now, the second part of Ta'an fil Ansab, it's the opposite of the first part. You are deriding people because of part of their descendants, part of their tribe. For instance, I recall very well when my dad said to me, I don't want you hanging around with that girl. You said you walked home from school with so-and-so. I said, why? He said, because she's Protestant. He said it. And I said, Dad, she's a Christian. He said, no, she's a Protestant. Now, I didn't know at that time that Protestants thought that Catholics were Satan because they didn't believe in and they actually hated the Pope. So as a small child, I was really aware of all of this tribal royalty or superiority or allegiance. And where did this come from? Prophet Muhammad fought against it. He warned against it. And yet we're still falling into the satanic trap of thinking for some whatever reason, partially or more so, that we're somehow better because of where we came from or who we came from or how great were our forebears. And the obverse. We actually would say something like, oh, you better not be seen with him because, he's mafia. Oh, don't think that she's a good person to hang around with. Her mother is divorced. Or something even worse than that. Well, do you know that her mother's in prison for drug trading? You see, all these kinds of things that we let roll off our tongue so easily. And then you read something like this, where the Prophet Muhammad said, do not do that. If you do that, you have jahiliyyah in you. Jahil, whether it be an adjective or a noun. It means that you don't have or want ilm or hikmah. You have no wisdom. Wisdom is hikmah, to follow the sunnah. And you don't have any knowledge. You don't have any knowledge. So we are now dealing with supposedly the most powerful nation in the world, the greatest nation of freedom fighters, liberty and justice for all. And I'm reading this Kitab al-Tawheed and I'm saying, no. There is severe jahiliyyah here. Severe. But does anyone care? Allah says in Quran, most people don't believe. Most people hate the truth. Most people are ungrateful. So kun ma sadiqeen. Stay with the truthful ones. That's a verse in Quran. So let's all take a deep breath. Tomorrow we're going to deal with the... Sorry. I lost my little thing that holds the phone. I don't know what they call it. It's a holder. So I've balanced it now. I've balanced it against my book. Yeah, I'm going to hold on to it just so it doesn't drop again. Told you I'm not tech savvy. I really am not. Okay, so we're going to tomorrow deal with the last two and give you just a little taste so you'll tune in tomorrow. We're going to talk about istisqa binujum wa niyaha. Believing that rain comes down by the planets and stars, which of course we know it's Allah. And the second one is wailing at graves. Wailing at graves is still prominent. Do you know in Ireland they pay women to go and wail at graves? it's women, it's always women, to make the dearly departed seem like she was so loved, because they would never want no wailing, because that would mean nobody was sad. It's all so incredibly, undeniably real. We humans, we are so deficient. And it's continuing and continuing and continuing. Because Prophet Muhammad said, you're never going to let go of it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.